In this video, I'll show how to use OBA to check the relative rate of biogas production, which can be used to determine when to end a BMP trial. So I'm going to start out with some data from the AMPTS2 system from bioprocess control. Here we have methane production for several different bottles. This is arranged in a wide format. And here in this other worksheet in the same file, we have the amount of inoculum and the amount of substrate VS. Both of those are needed for calculating BMP. So let's go to the app, and this change was just recently implemented, so you'll need version 0.5.15 or higher. And we'll work on processing biogas data. These are volume data. They're cumulative. We don't have a measured temperature for each observation, but actually these values are already standardized to dry conditions. And we don't have a measured methane content, but this is 100% methane. It's a wide format. Here's our data file. Which sheet has biogas? It's sheet 2. Let's take a look and make sure it was read in correctly. It looks correct. So our time column is called hour, and the units, hours. Volume, here with this wide format, we have to select the first column. So there it is, and here we see cumulative methane production. Now, to check the rates, we want to select this summarize option. We want to normalize by substrate mass, subtract inoculum production. We don't want to calculate means and standard deviation, though. We want to check rates to determine an end time. So our setup data are in this same file. We have to select it again. It is sheet 1. We can take a look, and it looks correct. So the ID column is called name. Description is called substrate. Substrate VS is called substrate VS, and finally the inoculum amount. But now we need to select, you need to identify the description for the inoculum only bottles. There we are. So here we have a plot that shows the relative production rate of methane. That's after subtracting out the inoculum contribution. So this is as a percent of the cumulative value per day, and there are a few different standards floating around for determining when a BMP trial should be ended. One of those, for example, is that the relative production rate drops below 1% per day for at least 3 consecutive days. So here's a 1% line, and each of these points are separated by 1 day, so we can see that all of the bottles meet that criterion. So this test could be ended. If this were an ongoing test and that was our criterion, we could use OBA to determine that the trial should be ended. If we were interested in being below a rate of 0.5% per day, then there are a few bottles that are not yet there. But let's assume we're interested in the 1% criterion. So we could then uncheck this box, calculate means and standard deviation, and not use a fixed time though, but rather relative. And we can see we get values for all our substrates. So the time that meets the criterion is automatically selected. We may try 0.5, but we should find that it doesn't work. And indeed, we get an error message here. So that's how you use OBA to check relative methane production rates to determine when you should end a trial.